Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for showing love and passion, common passion for this beautiful world and industry of design. Tonight I'm very honored because I won't be telling the usual narrative that I sometimes am asked to do, but I will be moderating a conversation that we wanted to call Mosaic Thinking. And where, if you look at the bigger picture of a mosaic, you get, the perception of a beautiful image, but then, every single element, every single piece of it represents a special piece of it that makes it happen. Like all the beautiful voices tonight perhaps will make happen a beautiful event, a memorable night, and express different voices of design and creativity, but moreover of collaboration. I'm gonna start from Kristen. Kristen founded a media platform, Say Hi To, right? She's also a creative director and also a curator. So a design curator and an art curator that often, also by being a journalist, I believe, is called to judge your own self, because as a curator, as a journalist, you could be asked to, tell us, tell the story that you on your own right. So there will be a lot to discuss here on narrative design and storytelling. We have Edoardo Monti, that is a talent, an emerging talent of the creative industry in Italy, and not only, but also a man who is devoted to empower people. He has a family house in Brescia, and he transformed this house in a artist house where he hosts artists to create. He empowers artists to excel and, I guess, blend ideas and express their own identity and vision to the future. So he will tell us what it means to empower design, to be so generous as a non-profit to, finance ideas and make them happen. And when we talk about ideas and make them happen, we have another extremely generous person, Professor Guan, that from London is visiting us, professor at the Royal College, but also inventor of this beautiful farmhouse where magic happens and ideas take place. And he will tell us more about his project, and I'm sure you will be extremely surprised about how he also empowers talent. Rodrigo and Mauricio, founders of Furf Design Studio, coming from Brazil, great attention and openness to, experimental project with marginalized community, supporting good design made by good people, good hands and good souls. And two friends here that I have the honor and pleasure to collaborate and work already at Natuzzi. Andrea Steidl, which I shared the journey of 2 years now at Natuzzi with our team making new collection. And the master and commander, Mr. Karim Rashid. Kristen, I will start from you. A few years ago, I believe that there has been over, with the empowerment and this new trend of social media eventually, and all the media content, fashion films, brands have been more and more attentive to how they communicate themselves. They often understood that perhaps a great product without great communication is unlikely, not as meaningful as a good project delivered with the right content and right message. And as a media personality and someone that perhaps empowers content through the narrative, what change are you seeing in the industry, and how are you seeing eventually narrative design spreading more and more, or becoming more niche, being relevant? Like, what is your perspective on narrative design today?
I think we've seen a lot of changes over the years, especially in a positive way, with a lot more depth with the collaborations that are happening. And I think that certain collaborations, narrative, it's not just marketing fluff. I would say that the brands that do it well, they invest in researching into designers, artists, creatives, that have a story to tell. And stories, with my platform, we want to investigate different parts of the world and communities through the creatives who live there. So I think the brands that are doing it well, they're creating more, listening to the people that they collaborate with, and creating partnerships which are true collaborations, where they're able to investigate the cultures, the history, through craft, through form, with telling the real story and listening to the artist or designer about their culture or their perspective, which at the end of the day, tells a lot about the history and their context. So yeah, I think that the brands that do it well, it's about true collaboration and listening rather than appropriation. And with that, you can create, it could be an Italian brand like Natuzzi and then working with someone from Kyoto and having them translate their culture and experience through the lens of the brand. So I think it's about listening and then, being able to create something with depth. And I think that you don't have to do a lot, but if you do that, it will be successful.
How you mentioned the word listening, right? I know you also curate, sometimes you triangulate eventually with designers and brands. How hard it is for you to create that dynamic of balance and respect and listening in creative processes?
Well, I guess if you're working with a brand, the first thing would be to understand what their values and goals are. Then after that, it could be, let's say, you could look into, I'll talk about Japan because that's where I work a lot. If it's about research and attention to detail and mastery of a craft, then you can find a designer that has similar values, and it's just then how do they translate the values through their cultural context, through that conversation. So I think it's about first figuring out the values and finding an artist and a brand that has similar values, and then it should be easy to communicate that and foster that relationship.
Thank you. Edoardo, tell us more about Palazzo Monti.
Palazzo Monti is a palazzo. We are in the very city center of Brescia, open to the public, so all of you are invited to come visit. He will be taking care of the RSVP list later at the party. It's a 12th century palazzo. I'll be giving the very sort of academic description, which has been part of the family since the 80s, and into 2017, we opened up the doors to an artist residency that welcomes 36 artists every year. We just opened on March 22nd, I was telling Kristen before, a new space called Fertile. It's a very sort of communal word and with the same meaning in different countries, as an expansion of Palazzo Monti. And what was born as a residency has now turned into a small cultural center, a contemporary art museum. So it's my home. I decided to move back from New York, where I was working in 2018, a year and a half after launching the project, because I felt that it was worth moving back to Italy for. And it's a non-profit, as you mentioned, which, by the way, doesn't mean no cost. So, we don't live off thin air.
I know. I am noticing, even in Milan Design Week these days, Art Week started last week and then it moved into immediately Design Week. There is and then if you look at Design Miami happening during Art Basel, I see that really the world of art in a purest way is kind of really contaminating or intertwining with the world of design. And of course there is more and more, I don't want to jump in the cliche of fashion brands coming into design, but there is definitely, I think, a good energy that is happening there. You being a chef behind the kitchen, what are you foreseeing in terms of positive drive in that trend?
Well, I think there's two main drives. One is the aesthetic drive and one is the economical drive, which could be parallel. If someone's willing to spend 10 million on a painting, why not spend 200,000 on a chair and a table? So that's why I think, a lot of design, especially collectible design, which is very different from the world of Natuzzi, for instance, and it's that fine line between art and design, have been popping up like mushrooms, piggybacking on art fairs. It's a reality. Collectors oftentimes equalizes a rich person with a lot of cash to invest. And then there's the aesthetic, if I'm willing to have a beautiful painting or sculpture or light, why not also want a beautiful sofa and a chair and a table and a spoon? So I think it's really part. I mean, I believe to be an esthete. I don't know, esteta in Italian. I like beauty. Like Valentino said, I love beauty. It's not my fault. So, but we have to be honest. I mean, there's a market for this. There's a market that justifies this conversation. If it supports small independent artisans and brands, then why not? I'm super happy to see these things that sort of, I said piggybacking because Art Basel has been around for 50 years, Design Miami for 10, 15, so it's coming along. But I think that a lot of these fairs have already established themselves as important voices.
Karim, like you have designed, how many pieces have you designed in your life?
I don't know. Do we need to wear the headphones?
Maybe, do we need to wear the headphones?
I'm good without them. Can I suggest something? Because I'm having a real trouble hearing you. If we can get everybody, attenzione. C'è questo spazio adesso e per questo, come si dice, ispirazioni, e vogliamo sentire questa gente qua. Ci sono tanti knowledge qua. Io non ho niente knowledge, ma questa gente hanno. Dunque, silence, please, okay? I can't concentrate. Sorry.
Thank you.
Let me answer. Let me say something towards what you just said. Art is here, design is here. They have nothing to do with each other. It's my opinion. Let me say why. In the 1930s, in the 1960s, in the 1980s, there was art furniture movements that happened. Every one of them collapsed. Why did they collapse? Because design is a comfortable, precious, meaningful object that functions beautifully in daily life. This chair is very comfortable, by the way, I have to say.
Marcantonio.
Okay, so point is, this is design. And we forget the definition of design. Design started with a simple machine. One of the first machines design started with, if we want to go back to Leonardo da Vinci, it started prior in ancient Egypt when they made an urn and they spun it on a table with the hand. The table was a machine to start creating a production of an object, serialized production, mass production. So, the art is another thing. Art is an incredibly selfish act. I watched my father paint morning, day, and night, abstract paintings. He studied with Bernard Léger, André Lot. He's an artist. I appreciate art to no end. I respect art when it's real art, first of all. Craft is craft. Craft, what is the definition of craft? Somebody in Murano spending 20, 30 years blowing glass to know the material and the craft exceptionally well. That's craft. That's not design either. Design is this microphone. As ugly and enormous as it is in front of our faces, this is design. So this idea of trying to merge has never worked. Firstly. Second of all, how can you compare a $10 million painting to a chair? You cannot. The art world has played a game of becoming as elite as possible intentionally for survival. Because at the end of the day, painting is over. And I say that about not only my father, I could say that about hundreds of painters I know. The reality is it's over. And it came from documentation, pre-photograph, to capture humanity. Photograph was the big shift, right? So we went into abstraction. Thanks to Kazimir Melovich, 1907, painted a black cross. Complete abstraction. Imagine before him, nobody made an abstract painting. When you think about this, it's pretty incredible, right? But when in the Renaissance, when we put a picture frame like that and somebody discovered one-point perspective, wow. Why did they discover? Because they were starting to document reality, i.e. as AI now. The documentation of reality, sorry, I have a mosquito in my eye, was incredible. Then 2-point perspective, then 3-point, because that's the way we perceive. You imagine before 1440, no one ever documented perspective. I think that's incredible to think about that. We put everybody's heads the same size in a Gothic painting because we couldn't understand that her head is way smaller than yours.
Edoardo's perspective, in a way, I think he was just mentioning that there is, I think what he's saying is different. I mean, on a commercial perspective, if I got you right, you're saying that. Sorry, I get his point. You know, there is many brand. Last night I was at an event of a brand that I actually cherish, Italian brand from Padova. I can't name it because we can do public advertising, but they do collectible design, and I honestly see that there is a subtle merge to art.
I agree, and you put them together. You could have a chair and a painting. Sculpture, no question. The merging of these festivals is for, I think, more of a political reason. The merging of the festivals is economic because then it drags a larger audience, number one, right? There's money to be made. But all I'm saying is there is a big difference between the two professions, you know? And a chair will never be art, period, because we have to sit on it and use it. I mean, it's fundamental.
Guan, you started this project, Grymsdyke, right? Outside London, more or less, and so is it more or less of a farmhouse kind of looking, or a warehouse, like? But as far as I understood, you represent the duality of teaching as a professor, but also encouraging mistakes in a way, because you practice the gentle and fascinating art of learning by doing in Grymsdyke project. So how do you envision, you know, arts, craft, experimentation, empowering people, giving opportunity to make it happen and make it real, make it with their hands?
Yeah, well, I mean, just to smooth over the question about design and arts, I want to address our community as community of people interested in creative practice, people who like to make things, or thinking about creative ways to solve a problem or invent a new material, just invent for the sake of, for fun. And I think that's the environment that I'm interested in. And at the farm in particular, I'm interested in the casting process. So you make a mold, you pour something in the mold, and then you wait, and it becomes solid. And then you open the mold, and there's this solid object that used to be a void. And it's just a transformative moment. You feel like, oh my God, it's amazing. I love this, And I think that it's this kind of moments that inspire me to share with others, this process of making as an important part of the creative practice. People define their own practice as they wish, but the environment in which one can, I suppose, build, this practice, I think needs to be thought about again, I think. And Grymsdyke Farm, I suppose, championed this idea that it's one thing to learn something, but it's actually very difficult to unlearn. So we have to be very careful what we teach someone. If somebody comes to the farm and we are with a group of students and somebody say, oh, I would like to do this. And I'm just thinking in my head, well, I did that last week and it was a complete disaster. But I'm not going to necessarily say that. I will often go to the shelf and say, hey, if you do this, this is what happened. And they decide for themselves whether they think it's worth doing or how they might do it differently. So what I do is I create a library of these actions that people make, and I put them on the shelves. And I think that's just my approach. And I think the environment of learning. It's very dynamic.
Today I went to a design school in Milan called Raffle. I did a podcast. That's why I was so fascinated by the headphones and the headset. I was like, I'm gonna have it tonight too. I'm sorry, so you have to wear it. No, but we were discussing of something that I'm pretty curious to hear from you all, because if you think about it, no one, like new generations that love your job of designers or design industry leaders, operators, design ambassadors, all, I mean, you were talking about arts and crafts and the making, which is definitely more on the artistic side. But if you think about it, of the new generations, who would want to go in a factory and sew a couch, right? So when I'm looking, and I'm pretty curious to hear from you that are, you know, more in the field or collaborating or telling narratives of designer and artists, like, are there people that still love, you know, crafting, being maker, learning how to be, you know, learning craftsmanship? Because I'm honestly hearing in the industry, here in Brianza, down in Puglia where I am, there is a big crisis ahead of us, you know. There is no real love anymore for that, you know, more humble side of design, if you want. Because everyone wants to be on Say Hi To and do a beautiful story, or a podcast with Furf Design, or, you know, be at the show and do interviews. But the story of who's behind, who's making, that's something that is much humble, is much simple, and not, I don't see, honestly, a legacy there that is being left to new generation to learn, to fall in love with that side of it. So you guys, for instance, you did a project with marginalized community in Brazil. And Brazil is an incredible country with a great heritage of craftsmanship. Mother Nature is very generous with use. What do you see there? I mean, how is the design industry on a more, let's say, tactile side moving in Brazil, and how do you see that evolving eventually?
Yeah, it really makes sense, all of this that you're bringing. At Furf Design Studio, we're in the industrial design studio. So we develop products that are mass produced in so many different areas, from furniture, with Natuzzi, to perfume bottles with huge companies, all the way to some craft stuff with marginalized people. And just making a link with something that you brought up, we've been creative directors for a crystal company in the south of Brazil, and they are crazy going after people that will be in the factories, actually putting their hands, like you said, like sewing a couch, sewing a sofa. There are no more people like that want to blow glass or do that kind of work. It's pretty rare nowadays with our generation, I guess. But I feel also there are ways that, on the other hand, there's more people becoming creators, I guess. We teach too, and we see so many students that are super excited to become a designer, which is really happy for us. I mean, we see so many people that now they just want to go to the digital world, and they just want to live on that virtual side of this world. But we see them, they're everywhere, and they're in Brazil at least. They are multiplying, let's say, even though it's rare.
Design is growing, but craftsmanship.
Yeah, but also we can also use design to help to make craftsmanship keep alive. In some ways, we believe that design can be a bridge between utopia and reality, and somehow. And let's say there's a few projects we've developed of furniture, mass-produced furniture, but there's a detail, like a button, that we have craftsmen doing that tiny detail. And for an interior design we did in northeastern Brazil, instead of just buying all the furniture, we connected with the local artisans and the craftsmen, to develop some of the products, like the lampshades and things like that would later become souvenirs for this hotel, the hotel's visitors. But it's a way to bring these people together and kind of connect them to the industry. Of course, they're not mass producing what they do, but it's tiny details that have this handmade, this craft. And this is very interesting because everything that is produced, it can have a bigger purpose, it can have an impact. Could it be social, economic, or poetic? A thing that we like is poetic also. If you can sometimes connect people, build these bridges and get them together, instead of just doing everything on your own, you bring these artisans to do something together with mass-produced design. It can even bring an impact, like a socio-economic impact on these communities, as it happened in this project in northeastern Brazil. Just for the first round of products for the hotel, the artisans, they got enough money they would get in like 5 years. And I see there's design is much more than just the product itself with that.
And well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you everyone for coming. But I think we come from a generation that it embraces diversity and embraces plurality. Brazil is about this. Brazil is not this or that. It's a mix of a lot of different things. A good friend, of course you know him, Humberto Campana, is a guy at university. We were like rebels at university, like, oh, what they are doing is art, is design, is art, is design. And then after we met him, it's he's like the humblest, coolest guy ever. And listening to him and talking to him, like drinking beer with him is like, he said, I don't know and I don't care. I want to create impactful things. And I think this is it's a lot about a new generation that is coming, a new generation that's rising. It's about going to the basics, let's say. I think the human race has an amazing capacity of overthinking and overcomplicating absolutely everything. So to try to make it simple, it's design comes from designium, Latin word, and design can be translated to meaning. Design is meaning. So a designer is someone who puts meaning into something. And as industrial designers, we mass-produced meaningful things. And that's beautiful. And that's of course, it's a huge responsibility, but also a huge possibility for making impactful things, for mass-producing poetry. And that's what we want to do. So regarding your question about crafts, I think maybe we're losing that super specialized person doing the same thing for generations. For example, we were in Modena with my wife. We ate the best tortellini ever, and we talked with the cooker, an amazing chef. And he said, "What's the secret?" And he said, "I learned from my grandma, and my grandma learned from her mother, that learned from..." And this has happened with design, this happened with crafts. But now we're in a generation that, yes, I want to learn how to sew, but also I want to learn how to paint, but I also want to learn how to work with AI. And that's beautiful. So going to the basics. As designers, we try to mass produce poetry. And that's the goal, I guess.
Can I interject for a moment? Yeah, you know what you're doing, and what you're doing. In general, does anybody here know who Peter Dormer is? You might know. Okay, Peter Dormer was quite an intellectual and taught at the RCA for many years. I think he was chair or dean. And he wrote in his last book before he died that craft is disappearing and it's become a hobby for the middle or upper class. Okay? So we're talking about two different things. The enjoyment of all of us making is a beautiful phenomena. And we know now, it's proven, that creative act helps depression, helps ADHD. There's now a movement going that, why? Because all of us as human beings have a desire and need to create. I have all my life, 40 years, I keep saying the same thing. To be is to create. We exist and we have the capacity of actual original creation. It's a beautiful phenomena, we all. So when you put some people to allow them to start doing some hobby and they're not even accustomed to doing a hobby or something craft or I like what you said, the realization, the manifestation that they made something. It's an important, beautiful and natural human instinct, right? Completely. That's very different than people sewing upholstery. That's very different than being on an assembly line or prisoners making license plates. You know, we're talking about two completely different things here. The Campana brothers, an example, I know them very well. My critique of that was that they were paying laborers in Brazil pennies, not them, the companies, and putting a chair on the market for 10,000 euro. I'm sorry, but for me, I'm shocked at that, you know? So we're talking about two different things. We know that robotics, machinery, rapid prototype, I could go on about technologies, are replacing the hand. And the hand is replaced. And anything we can do with the hand is being replaced eventually.
I want to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Because
You have to interrupt me or I'll keep talking.
I want to have a little bit the perspective of Andrea. Andrea, I have to say, like, I worked with many designers, but I've met very few that have such a sense of, you know, detail or knowledge on how to translate, you know, an idea, a sketch, or render into something physical. I have seen him spending literally days in the prototyping room and being, you know, the most prototypic version of a designer and a sophisticated designer. So, what is your perspective on how eventually the more, let's say, humble side, in a way, of design, which is also the making of it, how is it evolving, and what is your perspective as a designer who knows especially the Italian brands very well?
Thank you about this question, because for me everything we are saying it's very true, but also I want to add the fact that and maybe it's just to add one word more, is that design should be very humanistic in a way, from its starting point, which is trying to connect this quality of creativity plus a kind of quality of an arty piece also inside, like a piece of furniture or something that should work in any case. So in some way also designer, in my opinion, plays a role in which we try to take some interesting sensitivity of art and try to put in something that should work and should work as an industrial product, which add a very deep responsibility about the profession of a designer. It's not just about a joke. When you have to think about a product, you have a responsibility for an aesthetic, but also you have a responsibility because you are working for a community. And the community of people which are putting the values of their investments, of their time, of their hands, of their sweat. And it's very important, especially for the communication inside and outside the company, is that this value should be clear to everybody. It's not just about taking about colors, about shapes, there's a part of technicality in our job, which is we know especially what it is, which level we reached with some products and not maybe with another one. But for me also design is very interesting because it's a humanistic discipline in which you have to come in contact with people that should understand your vision of design. And they should understand that, and you take them with your hands, and you try to reach this target. Even if, in my opinion, again, design is not about performance, like the performance you do then on the market. But this is something that it's in some way, this part is something which is not really connected with the spark that we have to deal with. No, we know that this as much as you come out with a product which is high quality, which is probably good. And you respect your vision so that people can understand that and can produce it in that level, as much the company will gain this value. No? So it's very important for me. Whenever I come to a factory, for me it's fantastic because this is a community. We just talk about the market, no, but stop before. I mean, we just enter there and everybody looks at you and you are having very different conversation between the different capabilities and sensitivity of each worker, like which is fantastic. And this phenomenon, this kind of air that you understand that create this magic, which comes then on the market with the product. But sometimes when I go in the factory, for me it's fantastic when everybody is satisfied and everybody is happy. So in some way also sometimes I have to say, both of us we have to be happy. No, both of us we have to create that we are proud of it. This one, and as much as both of us we are, as much as everybody will understand that.
Kristen, you are someone that in a way maybe knows even the behind the scenes, but it also takes the message to the outer, bigger, broader world. Are you seeing a trend of, return to these? He's been talking about values, right? Values of heritage, craftsmanship, this sense of respect for community of workers, companies with their manufacturing DNA, or designers being respectful about that, companies spending time on that. And then you also have, another side of the moon, which is what Karim was saying, robotics, and everything is going to go AI, and eventually AI is going to teach robots how to do and make a beautiful chair without human hands. What is your perspective on the market trend? Do you see a return or a total dilution of these values?
Well, if you don't mind, actually, I've found your last question super interesting. So if I could add something to it and then kind of, can you hear me? I don't know if it's segue into this, is something that I've noticed from, the past 10 years. I've been on the road like 9 months of the year. So I'm American, but I live between Paris and Tokyo, but also spent like a year in Mexico, several months in India. I'm always traveling around, following the story and interesting things I'm discovering. And something that I noticed about craft, and perhaps the loss of craft, is if you go somewhere like Norway, the craftsmen are paid more than the designers. So it's a very different experience than when you go to Mexico and the craftsmen are paid pennies, and then the objects are sold maybe with a luxury fashion brand for thousands after. And the way that the craftsmen view their work and themselves and the confidence that they have and desire to do what they're doing. So you also see it in France. I mean, in France, craftsmen are paid very well. It's a very prestigious job to be a craftsman in France. You have to do certain levels of apprenticeship, and the final product, if you have French craftsmen, it's going to be very expensive. And then I spent a lot of time in Mexico, and I these are observations. I don't always have the answers to the questions. It's not my culture, but from the conversations that I had with Mexican designers, particularly Fernando La Paz, who, in my opinion, is one of the most important contemporary designers of our generation, social designer, regenerative design, and the final medium would be collectible design pieces, but it's really about the narrative. Anyway, he works in Tonohuixtla, which is this little community in Puebla. I went there with him for a week, and he was explaining to me, Kristen, this village, now they've gotten so many people to move back to the village and work with him. But at the beginning, he said, why would they want to sit here and learn how to weave or work with these different materials when they're being paid nothing? And then they see on TV, everyone has an iPhone, and they're in the city, and they're doing all of these other things, and they say, I want to be a part of that. And it's like when they think that all they can do is make something that will be sold, as a trinket to a tourist that has that iPhone, why will they want to do it? So he, kind of set up this community where they brought back the indigenous corn seeds. They created a new craft with the corn husks, which was not being done before. So before, historically, this village was growing corn, selling the corn for like 15 cents per cob. Now they can keep the corn and eat it, and in the community, and then use the husk to create this architectural veneer, which I don't know the price, but let's say it's like 250 pounds per square meter. Everyone is paid 3 times or 4 times normal wages. They have healthcare. They get to. He even brings some of the people from his when he does talks in Switzerland. Brings some of the people, the artisans that are working with him, and empowers them. Like, it's not just me. I'm not just the face of. Like, these are the people that's making this happen. And when they feel empowered, everyone's invested. Everyone wants to learn this craft, innovate the craft with him, and it's a totally different experience. So I also think the cultural context matters a lot, how the culture values craft. And then, of course, I'm sure, like Andrea was saying, like the communities within factories or within brands also, would be a different microcosm of that. But
Edo, thank you, Kristen. You come from a region of Italy, Brescia, Bergamo, where there's a lot of, I would say heritage in craftsmanship, right? And I'm curious if at Palazzo Monti you have that good collaboration and conversation with your artists and the local craftsmen, and if there is what are the dynamics around Palazzo Monti? Do you guys make like in projects in the farmhouse of Guan, or you are these more autonomous independent artists that do their own media? How do you interact on that process?
I believe that not even performers that use their own body do not rely on a supply chain. The painter needs a paintbrush, colors, canvas, stretcher bars, and these are all supplied by 4 different people. Each piece of art, like design, has a supply chain behind it. I don't think we would be where we are now if we were in Milan. Let's just put it, like that, or London, or Paris, or New York, where artisan prices are 10 times more expensive than in smaller cities. So the advantage of being nearby Milan but not in Milan is that, we are not isolated. So I see the pros, but most of the cons of setting up a design studio or an artist residency in the middle of nowhere, because you need connections and you need to be able to make the conversations that Andrea and Kristen were saying within, not like 10 hours of flying. I'll just make a very quick example. For those of you who will come to visit, there's a bronze sculpture that's the cast of my own body that was made in 2018. We got a quote from a foundry in Verona, 3,000 euros. I'll be very open about it. And the same casting would have cost 12,000 euros in Milan. That's an hour drive. It's not 10-hour drive difference. So imagine being an artist or designer and not knowing that there's a 3,000 euros option. That means that you have to price your sculpture or chair at 50,000 to make up for it. Whereas if it's 3,000, you can sell it for 6 or 9 and still make a profit and allow for customers to buy the piece. So what I'm saying is, like, there are no foundries everywhere, but the advantage of being in Brescia, which is the 4th city in Italy for GDP, that has been counting on centuries of high quality makers, especially with metal, especially with stone. We have a marble cave, Botticino, that's like 10 minutes driving distance. It's definitely an advantage. And over the years, we've built a network that is sort of like a supply chain. So it's
you have your own ecosystem.
I can't control it.
There's an ecosystem.
Yeah, and that's a blessing, because I always say that our residency wasn't born for the city, but with the city. We didn't build the palace. We didn't, it's a 12th century palazzo. We didn't build it or buy it. So we just happened to come up with something to do with it. So that's just, we were lucky to not be in the middle of, for instance, Pantelleria, which is amazing, but there's no way to support the creatives as much as we wanted to. The future is not Milan for making, from actual making. And designing and making is very different.
Listen, I think our friends have been standing quite some time listening to us. If there's some of you who want to add something to the conversation, for me it was very nice to spend time with you, get to know your point of view and perspective, get together, learn from you, and ultimately collaborate. You know, I am learning a lot. My girlfriend is here. Her Instagram used to be, "I'm a student of life," and I will quote that. I like that. And tonight I've been a happy student. You are great humans, great designers, and souls. I think that everything you do will help to keep design good and good design made by good people. And tonight you've been great people. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Karim, for
Pleasure. Thank you all.
having left some space to these poor people to speak, because usually you speak and you take it over, nobody can talk. So thank you, Karim, for being so generous tonight and letting them
You know,
do their spiel.
They gave me a sleeping pill. So, you know what? I just want to. I have to say one comment at the end here. Everything we're talking about, you know, it's quite beautiful. This empowering people to make things and do things. It's very important, as you said, about an ecosystem of getting all the people getting better wages, all this thing. But you know, and all of it is relative and important, because you know, if you're a smart person and you're a thinker and you're contributing, we're shaping and helping somehow making the world a better place. There's no question about that. The only comment I just wanted to say about these last few points I heard is, I remember I was making television for Brion Vega in 1984. I was working with Rodolfo Benetto in Milano. And the model maker, the very famous one, Nizzo, the one that made everything in wood, you know? Do you remember? What's his name? Yeah, Saki. He came with the television model in wood that I had drawn. And I looked at this wood, beautiful. I would have loved to have kept that object. The craft was phenomenal. And you know what? I looked at the TV, and the engineer from Brion Vega was there, and the Benetto was there. I was there, and one other young designer in the office. And we looked, and there was something different than the drawings. I did the drawings, 2D, you know, like old school. And I looked, and I said, "This is beautiful." And I looked at it, and I went, "It's much better than what I drew." And it was. And everybody on that community that worked together had such an amazing passion and eye for making the best television possible. This collective. So I know, and when I'm in a factory, I feel you. And I love what you said about Mexico. I helped the Pueblo village in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Elevate. All this stuff resonates with me very much. So don't look to me like the Antichrist. You know?
No, but I love to hear another perspective. It's what actually gets us thinking. So
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
My only concern about all we're talking about is Gaetano Pesce. We all know Gaetano Pesce, right? Bless his soul. He was my teacher and a beautiful man, really a thinker, beautiful thinker. His whole philosophy was to let the workmen basically have creative input in production. So when Castina released a table in 1981 with crooked legs in different colors, when you walked in the shop, there was a little sign and it said, "If you order this table, it will not be the same." And I thought that was beautiful. I was a student here in Milan at that time. Memphis just started. I saw that table and I went to Gaetano and I said, "Gaetano, why are they going to be different?" And he was explaining to me that they had buckets of resin, the mold, and the ropes. And the workman pulled any rope he wanted, like a game, and poured different colors into, and we see his vases and bowls around fish design, right? So the worker created, and I want to just leave this one point. If the person who's sitting there sewing away is not doing repetitive work, which is very damaging, and I worked in the car assembly in Detroit when I was 16 on assembling cars. People become drug addicts, alcoholics, it's a mess. So if the workman is creative, that's a different story. And that's what we're missing here. That we have to be able to be creative. And how are you going to get young people to get interested in sewing and stuff if it's repetitive motion? They don't want to do this. And frankly, no human being actually at some point will do this. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, in fact, I think we should really understand how much human beings should increase this mechanization and when and how. And AI also, it's a thing which is, I don't want to introduce that, but it's very important that we balance between what human should come and give to an activity that could be a service or a product, and what mechanization can give us. So it's very important that design stay connected with the amount of human that can be inserted in a product, that from an idea to a way of producing. It's very important. So everybody also in the design community have to be very, very, very warned about what is going on in these last moments.
Yeah, and Pasquale, I think I just wanted to say, thank you for having us. And I feel like the conversation has this mosaic quality. Just to go back to the theme a little bit, that there's so many different perspectives. Started with Karim making a clear boundary and very articulate ways to say how art and design is different, which sets a really for me, very important part about this picture or this metaphor of the mosaic, that it has boundaries. So this little mosaic has little boundaries, but these little boundaries are for us to define in a way. But the boundary, in a way, creates the mosaic. But at the same time, it is also fluid. There is no reason why, the mosaic needs to be of this shape or of this size, or it should be even in size. In fact,
and it's infinite.
In fact,
yeah.
And that, I think, it's another level of this idea of your very beautiful word.
Guys, we could go on for the whole night.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, everyone. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you
everyone
for
everyone.
coming, and thank you, Pasquale.
Thank you.
Thank you.